Thank you all for being here today, and good morning.
Good morning.
Let me first just express my condolences to the family of former Governor Edgar. His leadership leaves a long-lasting impact on not just the city of Chicago, but the entire state of Illinois. I also want to thank a number of members from my administration for being here today. Our Deputy Mayor of Immigrant, Migrant, and Refugee Rights, Beatrice Ponce de Leon, Deputy Mayor of Community Safety, Gary and Gatewood. We have our Budget Director, Annette Guzman, and then my Corporate Counsel, Mary Richardson-Laurie. This morning, I signed an executive order protecting the right to protest in the city of Chicago. Chicago remains a center of civic action, as it has been since our founding. Whether it's the abolitionist movement led by Chicagoans like John and Mary Jones, the uprisings for an 8-hour workday in the Haymarket era, the industrial union movement led by the CIO, the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, and other collective actions over the last 2 centuries. As history shows us, these peaceful protests have been a true catalyst for social change. This order is about being proactive, as we saw what happened in Broadview just a few days ago, where protesters were shot with less lethal bullets, pepper bullets, for peacefully protesting. With the presence of ICE in our neighborhoods, we can expect Chicago residents to follow in the footsteps of the generations of Chicagoans who came before them and peacefully assemble and protest. The First Amendment clearly states that we have the right to peacefully assemble, petition our government, and speak freely without intervention or fear of retaliation. If the federal government will not uphold this right, then the city of Chicago will. This executive order solidifies our commitment to protecting the constitutional rights of all residents and visitors, including the fundamental right to free speech and, again, to peacefully assemble. With this order, the roles of city departments and agencies and the Chicago Police Department are clearly defined in order to support peaceful protests and the exercise of First Amendment rights. Today, the city of Chicago affirms that peaceful protests and dissent are essential to public safety, democracy, and civic engagement. And we affirm that the CPD possesses the resources, training, and professional expertise necessary to safeguard the exercise of the First Amendment freedoms within our city. This executive order is part of our Protecting Chicago initiative, a cross-departmental effort to protect our residents' constitutional rights and defend our democracy. Another effort in this initiative that I am proud to announce is the launch of our Protecting Chicago Toolkit, available on the new city website, chicago.gov/protect. Designed to provide residents streamlined updates of any federal intervention as well as centralized resources. This website is an expansion of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant, Migrant, and Refugee Rights' successful Know Your Rights campaign. The resources from the Know Your Rights campaign can be found on this website, in addition to resources that will help residents plan for peaceful protests, stay informed of their rights, and there is information on previous executive orders which affirm that CPD will remain locally controlled. The city of Chicago will continue doing everything in our power to protect communities and ultimately defend our democracy. The website, again, is chicago.gov/protect, and I encourage our residents to remain informed, civically, peacefully engaged. Lastly, I'm sure all saw that the Finance Committee unanimously approved our global settlement for the Watts case. This is about 2 things. 1, justice for survivors of torture and abuse by those who have been charged with keeping us safe. As all of you may remember, I included funding in our first budget for a monument in Chicago to honor the survivors of police torture. So this is a long-standing commitment of mine. It's not enough to just push for constitutional policing today. We also must rectify the crimes of the past and that starts with justice for the victims. And in this instance, we're talking about 170 cases and 204 years of custody. 2 centuries in custody is what we're talking about. And secondly, this is, of course, about protecting the taxpayers. As much as we can, we have to do that. And this is a good deal for the people of Chicago, and it's a fair deal for the survivors of these crimes. And that is why I instructed our corporation counsel to pursue this strategy, and I'm glad that the city council agrees with our approach. And finally, I want to congratulate, again, we have another grandparent amongst us, reporter Fran Spillman, on becoming a brand new grandmother on Sunday, and so we wish her and her entire family all the best. So thank you all. Now I am gleefully ready to answer all of your questions.
Okay. Testing. All right. William, we're going to start with you. Right here.
Oh. Wasn't expecting that. Mayor Johnson, we've all seen the horrific video of Irena Zaruska being stabbed in the neck on public transportation. In Chicago, we have countless examples of women being punched in the face, choked out, robbed, abused, murdered by violent repeat offenders. And your only legislation or in regards to public safety on public transportation is don't smoke cigarettes. Is there anything that you'd like to say to the women who have been abused by violent repeat offenders in the city of Chicago?
Well, first of all, my community safety plan is far more substantive than just asking people not to smoke. Our investments in community safety have been unprecedented, quite frankly, and public safety and community safety will always remain my top priority. Our deputy mayor can speak very cogently about the community safety plan, which is the people's plan. And the ultimate goal is to drive violence down in the city of Chicago, whether it's on a train or in a neighborhood. There are way too many individuals, of course, that have been victimized by violence. And it, again, is my top priority to continue to make sure that we're investing in our detectives division as our detectives bureau coordinates and collaborates with our counterintelligence and all of our stakeholders come together to drive violence down in the city of Chicago. Many of these acts, as you have described, are quite horrific, and that's why I'm working hard every single day to make sure that even with the 30% reduction in homicides, even with the over 35% reduction in shootings and shooting victims, as we continue to get a handle on robberies. Look, any act of violence is one act too many. And I'm going to work hard every day to ensure that we build the safest, most affordable big city in America.
Mayor Johnson, we've all seen the horrific video of Charlie Kirk being politically assassinated. In Chicago, we saw an ICE agent reportedly run over by an illegal alien. Many people tell me, real Chicagoans tell me, that it's your violent, racist hate speech that is causing people to commit these acts of violence. What do you say to the real Chicagoans who detest what they call the insipid, insidious, boneheaded hate speech that you engage in on a daily basis?
Well, first of all, I don't engage in hate speech. In fact, I think it's important that we note that, as I've said from the very beginning of this tragedy that occurred in our country, that political violence is not only abhorrent, but it undermines the sensibility of our democracy, and there's no place for political violence. In fact, violence as a whole is something that, as a country and as a nation, that we have to continue to come together to ensure that we eliminate all acts of violence, My prayers, of course, are still with Mrs. Kirk and the 2 children of Charlie Kirk. But again, we boldly and in very direct terms openly reject all acts of violence, and particularly political violence. Thank you for those questions.
Can we go to Heather?
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Gregory Bovino is in town. He arrived this morning promising many more arrests by ICE of people he say are undocumented. What do you say to the people of Chicago who saw those videos this morning and felt fear and concern for their relatives and loved ones?
Well, look, I understand that the fear and the anxiety is real. That's what this president is attempting to promulgate. That is his tactic. The city of Chicago is a firm, welcoming city. And so in terms of how our local police department will behave, along with my administration, we're going to ensure that the people of Chicago know their rights. We're going to protect people's rights to be able to peacefully assemble and push back against this form of tyranny that is being promulgated throughout our entire country. And then finally, we are putting forth, again, more stronger executive orders to ensure that there are policies in place to ensure maximum protection for the people of Chicago. What I'm also grateful for, though, is that the number of people in this city that have come together and have put their arms around our immigrant community. Look, this is an important part of the fabric and the soul of Chicago. Immigrants from around the world, whether they're Polish, Jewish, Italian, immigrants have come to the city of Chicago to find absolute refuge. And we're talking about 3 and 4 generations later. And that's what the president is trying to interrupt. Somehow he's intimidated by the level of diversity in the makeup of the city of Chicago. This is a city that has a long history of resistance. Again, the city that birthed Keep Hope Alive, Yes We Can, right? The city that birthed the labor movement. And so we're going to continue to remain firm, and I get that people are feeling a level of anxiety, but they should be assured that as far as I'm concerned, in my administration, we're going to work with all of our stakeholders to ensure that the people of Chicago are protected and supported.
This afternoon, and the president renewed his threat to send the National Guard to Chicago over your objections and the objections of Governor Pritzker. Is there any reason for the president to deploy National Guard troops or other armed military personnel to Chicago to focus on crime or violence?
You know, Dr. King referred to militarism as a sickness. Unfortunately, this president is full of that sickness. There are no circumstances under which the deployment of American soldiers should be sent in cities across America. It's actually quite upsetting that this president has seduced a number of American people into his meretricious form of governance that has placed our democracy at incredible risk. That's why I put forth executive orders to ensure maximum protection. That's why we're going to continue to hold firm as a welcoming city. But this is why we're also going to reject this illness of militarism, of racism, the sickness of not being willing to address poverty. If this president was sincere about addressing crime in Chicago and American cities, he would not cut the budget by 30% of ATF. There's an opportunity for ATF to coordinate with local police departments across America to get illegal guns off the streets of Chicago and cities across America that are being illegally trafficked from states like Mississippi, Louisiana, Indiana. That's an effort that's worthwhile investing in. Unfortunately, it's pretty clear that the office of the president has been cheapened by this president.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
On the executive order, can you kind of specify how this directive to CPD to coordinate with protest organizers is different from current CPD policy? And can you walk through sort of an example of when this policy would come into play?
Well, thank you for that question. Let's look at what happened in Broadview. There's no policy in place that if the federal government interferes with our First Amendment rights, there's no policy in place. This executive order gives a clear order that in the event the federal government tramples on the Constitution, our police department has a responsibility to make sure that we're protecting our democracy. And we saw this happen in Broadview, where from a roof you had the federal government with armed, less lethal, bullets, but it's still bullets nonetheless. And so this is why this executive order is critical, because we want to make sure that there's a clear policy on what the CPD has a right to do now under my executive order.
On the budget task force that you assembled and the report that's out, it recommends increasing property taxes with the rate of inflation, saying the city needs its largest revenue source to keep up with the rate of inflation. Have you had a chance to read through that report, and do you agree with that recommendation?
I have not read through the entire report. As you know, this is a part of a larger package of engagement, whether it's this working group, our community engagement. We've had several community engagement meetings within communities. We have, again, our entire budget working group as well. I don't agree with that particular proposal that the working group has put forward. But one of the things that it's clear to note that the working group fully established that we do not have a spending problem in Chicago. We have a revenue challenge in Chicago. And that's an important conclusion that I believe was necessary for the people of Chicago to hear. And again, to know that we have brought together everyone, different facets of leadership, whether it's the business community, labor, community-based organizations, elected leaders, the neighborhoods themselves. Like, I'm literally taking all of the interests and ideas from a cross-section of individuals across our city to ensure that we deal with the structural damage that we've inherited. We're going to fix it, and we're going to do it together, though. Thank you.
Mayor, good morning.
Good morning.
We were told, our sources with News Nation were told that Secretary Noem is also in town as part of the Border Patrol enforcement efforts. Have you heard anything from DHS, your office specifically, and even to go a step further, have you heard anything from the White House as far as those threats to send the National Guard beyond what we heard from you guys within the last few weeks, that there had been no communication?
That still that remains the same. We have not had any direct conversations from the White House. The president uses these really awkward interactions at the White House to randomly spew inaccurate information, or even, I guess the best thing that I could call them are suggestions at best. Threats, of course, is what they are more like. However, but there has not been any coordination with my office, our Chicago Police Department, to drive violence down in the city of Chicago. Look, we want criminals off the streets of Chicago. I want to be absolutely clear about it. We want them off the streets of Chicago. There's a way in which we can do that by upholding our Constitution, as well as working to keep the people of this city safe. This president is not interested in that. He has eroded the very sensibilities about our democracy, and our humanity continues to be trampled on by this president as well. But we're not going to tolerate it in the city of Chicago. We're going to stand firm. We're convicted in our values as it relates to standing up for working people and for the immigrant community. If this president was serious, he would coordinate with us and have conversations around the things that are actually working in our city.
Just one more question on the topic of crime in the city. Obviously, last week, the story involving suspects that were alleged to have robbed the Louis Vuitton store and then crashed into a man who was on his way to his final shift before his paternity leave really caught a lot of people's attention, and a lot of people very upset that an innocent man lost his life. Anything that you'd want to say just regarding those acts that we've seen from folks in the city? We've seen several pretty significant crash and grab sort of style crimes, and it seems to be catching the attention of a lot of people who may even be advocating for the National Guard to come in. What would you say, to the family impacted by that, and people who may have concerns about that type of violence in the city?
Well, look, it's my top priority, addressing violence in our city and community safety as a whole. I speak with the superintendent every day. We speak on a regular basis, sometimes throughout the day. And this is something that I've talked to him about. We are going to have more substantive conversations with business leaders in the city to find ways in which we can prevent these type of violent acts from occurring. Now, the good news is that we've caught them, right? And we're going to hold people accountable. This is what I said from the very beginning. It's why I've invested so much into our Detectives Bureau. And I'm grateful for the work of our local police department that was able to bring swift recovery, if you will, to what took place. And then most importantly, of course, when you see this type of tragedy, and particularly when loss occurs, it breaks your heart every time. We're talking about a family member, an innocent bystander who gets caught up in this nonsense, right? And so we fully expect that there will be absolute accountability for these perpetrators, and we're going to continue to work with our police department and our business community to come up with other strategies to ultimately prevent these type of occurrences from taking place.
Mayor, thank you. Can you
Of course, you're
clarify
welcome.
what you meant when you talked here just a moment ago? You said, we will protect the taxpayers as much as we can.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So look, we're talking about 176 individuals that are cases of innocent people. And look, we have to right those wrongs. And so as we talk about constitutional policing moving forward, we have to ensure that we build and just build the trust between local law enforcement and the community. And so one of the things that I directed our corporate counsel to do from day one is that we have to look at these past settlements and we have to find a better strategic way at addressing them. Look, at some point, we're going to have to pay restitution or reparations, quite frankly, to these individuals. And it's going to cost taxpayer dollars. But coming up with this strategy was so that we could mitigate some of the full harm that, quite frankly, hits not just those individuals who have suffered under this particular police officer, Watts, but also making sure that we are moving forward with some level of responsibility when it comes to the taxpayers. Like, look, $90 million is not something to just blink your eye at. But as the corporate counsel has expressed, conservatively, had we not settled this the way we have, it could have cost $500 million.
And I know it's been mentioned somewhat, but can you address, it sounded as if Chicago was not going to be any target as of last week. Now this week, here we are. So what do you make of that they on again, off again? Yeah,
the president is unstable. He's an unstable man. He's a very double-minded individual. He is, and there's no secret there. Look, we remain focused in our position as a city. Defending and protecting the rights of Chicagoans, that is my reasonable service as mayor of this great city. And I will stand up and against anyone who looks to disrupt and interrupt our democracy. Chicago has a long history of remaining firm and strong when it comes to protecting the civil liberties of people, and I will do that. This is the problem with this president. He has cheapened the office. This is why you don't buy knockoffs. Over time, it withers.
Mayor, thank you for taking the question.
Of course.
If I heard correctly, you mentioned...
Well, it depends on which questions you're about to ask me. No, go ahead.
Let's see how it goes. So I think I heard you correctly saying that you don't agree with the budget group's recommendation for the CPI index property tax increase?
I do not agree.
Okay. And so I was wondering what what items you may agree with, and if you have any thoughts about the or up to $455 million worth of cuts that they had suggested as well.
Well, look, I have not read the full report. I think all of us are looking at it at the same time. And again, this is part of a larger effort to bring multiple voices to the table so that we can deal with the structural challenges. Again, I just want to highlight the fact that this working group, this very diverse group, they were all very clear that we do not have a spending problem in Chicago. We do not. We have a revenue challenge in this city. And so, there are some ideas that they've put forth that I get a chance to review. For instance, some of we can find more productive ways in which we can administer government, right? So there are some forms of technology that we can use so that we're not duplicating activity, right? So there are some cost savings there I believe that the group actually put forth a proposal around the corporate head tax. There's no secret to where I stand there. So we're going to, I'm going to dig in and look at this report, but there are multiple reports that are going to come out, and we're going to make sure that every single voice in the city of Chicago is heard in our budget process.
Follow up to that, one of the recommendations was to maximize the TIF surplus. I believe it was about $137 million that was cited. Do you agree with that you were going to surplus a maximum amount of $137 million?
Well, look, we're going to look at TIFs, of course, right? I mean, there's no secret here. The last two budgets, I believe, I released the largest TIF surplus in the history of Chicago. Is that correct, Budget Director Guzman? So people obviously know my values. Again, we're going to explore and look at everything, but it's something that I'm grateful for, though, that so many different voices are actively engaged as I convene people of cross sectors to ensure that we build on essentially what my vision for the city of Chicago is, which is for it to be the safest, most affordable big city in America.
Hi, Mayor. Good to see you're feeling
Yeah.
better.
Do you have a nickname
Do I have a nickname?
for now that you're a grandfather?
Not yet. He doesn't. He hasn't been able to articulate.
Okay,
So
I'm
I'll
just
wait
saying, you want to
I'll go
give
by
one to
whatever he calls me.
You don't care?
Well, I do. We're going to have to have a conversation about that. But,
All right.
thank you for asking.
Any recommendations for Fran? No, I'm teasing.
no,
I'm teasing.
no, none.
All right.
Staying in my lane, okay? Let me going back to Broadview. One of the things that I think we saw out of Broadview was the protesters there blocking the ICE agents from coming and going from their facility. Do protesters have a right to prevent the feds from doing their job and coming and going from their facility?
Well, look, this is why this executive order is so critical, right? Because it sets up parameters. Look, I don't have, that particular example that you just raised that has not been brought before me. But again, this is about making sure that in the event the federal government attempts to eliminate the First Amendment right for our folks in Chicago to peacefully be able to assemble, we have now an executive order that specifies what's permitted.
So just to follow up on that, if they were to, for example, block a facility in Chicago, protesters were, and the ICE agents were not able to come and go to do their job, would that be an acceptable form of protest that would be, protected by Chicago police? Or, I mean, just so we clarify what
No,
you're saying.
just absolutely. Look, there are areas in which the First Amendment can be freely expressed. If someone is in violation of federal law, or if it works outside the parameters of the First Amendment, that's a much different case. But what we're talking about here in Chicago is making sure that the right to be able to peacefully assemble and do that without obstruction from the federal government, that's what this goal of the executive order is.
And just to help me understand further on that point, how would you envision the federal government acting in that way? And what does this really change for what we've seen? I mean, we saw, you mentioned the DNC, obviously there was
Craig,
a lot of
can we
restrictions.
keep going?
So, what
Yeah, look,
actually
I
changed?
mean, here's the thing. Because this president is so unhinged, we just don't know what his directives are going to be. The point is that there's something very fundamental about our country, and that's the ability to be able to peacefully assemble and petition its government. That's what this executive order does. And if the federal government attempts to erode and trample on the Constitution, the city of Chicago is not going to stand for it. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor
Yes.
Johnson. How are you
Yeah.
feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling great, thank you.
Some folks watching Monday Night Football last night saw an ad from DHS inviting Chicago law enforcement officers to come work for them, generous benefits, student loan forgiveness, and inviting them to complete their mission because officers in sanctuary cities were being prevented from doing so. Do you think DHS is trying to poach members of the Chicago Police Department, and how do you think that affects the department's ability and effort in recruiting new officers, sir?
Look, under the leadership of Superintendent Snelling, he's done an incredible job at restoring the morale of our police department, which had been depleted for some time, as well as working to institute constitutional policing, right? That's the direction that we are, that's where we are now. and we're moving with expediency to ensure that our police department shows up on behalf of the people of this city in an honorable way. What this president is proposing, and you've seen this in his budget, where he has placed more dollars in the hands of ICE operation than in the hands of working people. And, you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, for many of our folks who are serving on the front line, where they see poverty every single day. They do. You know, they see Chicagoans in too many instances in their worst state. And it's also disingenuous because if he was serious about supporting local law enforcement, why is he withdrawing 30% of the funding that would go towards getting illegal guns off the streets of Chicago? That's what our officers need. They need support from the federal government to ensure that we can work in collaboration to get illegal guns off the streets of Chicago and to hold the criminals accountable. You know, so, you know, I'm very proud of the work that we are doing in this city. There's a lot more work to be done. But this president, his approach is just all messed up. It's just off, right? And so we're going to remain firm in ensuring that we have the strongest, the best, and the brightest that are serving on the front lines of the city of Chicago. And I'm very proud of the work that our police department is doing.
And to follow up, so you're not concerned that ICE is going to poach members of the Chicago Police Department?
I mean, look, first of all, can I just say that it's a horrible way to recruit. It just is. And again, I think the focus is it's making sure that the people of Chicago know that we have a city and a government that is ran with discipline, it's ran with compassion and love, but also ran with real structure, right? And so I don't sit around worrying about, you know, the president's tactics. You know, the things that I concern myself with every single day is making sure that people can put food on their table, that they have good paying jobs, they have access to health care, that we can build more affordable housing. That's what I focusing on every single day, and that's the full force of my administration is doing that on a daily basis.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So following up on your alleged pants on fire moment on WBEZ today with my colleague Prosperity and the ongoing split sentiment as far as sending in troops to militarized, federalized military rather, to Chicago. The remaining question that has yet to be answered, because y'all keep running from it like I'm Mary Ann Ahern, is what do you, the Illinois Attorney General, and the governor have to offer in lieu of sending in the National Guard, the 101st Airborne, or what have you, to make Chicagoans feel safe in their communities in real time outside of reported statistics and so on?
I think I understand your question. Okay, let me just start with this. How about this? In 1974, there were 970 murders. Okay. 1995, there were 828 murders. 2016, 778 murders. 2021, 805 murders. This has been a problem in this city for a very long time. Now, my deputy mayor, Gatewood, this is the topic and the work every single day to drive violence down in the city of Chicago. So when you talk about what we're offering a better pathway so that we don't have 970 people murdered in our city every single year. Now, one is one too many, but you're not going to convince me that the people of Chicago only deserve law enforcement. I get so sick and tired of people believing that the only thing that black and brown and poor people get to get in this city are badges. People want jobs. It's why we've increased the ability for young people to have jobs in this city. People want health care and behavioral mental health care. That's what they ask me. That's why we've expanded it. People want to be able to afford to live in this city. That's why I'm building more affordable units. People want justice if they do get wrapped up into this spiral of despair in this city. It's why we're actually solving cases, whether it's CVI workers, making sure that we're avoiding retaliation in this city. I get so sick and tired of people in this country and in this city that believes that the only thing that you can offer black people and poor people is jails, incarceration, and police officers. Dr. King said this right here in Chicago, the National Conference on New Politics. What did he say? He said, militarism is a sickness. I am trying to eradicate the sickness from this city and from this country.
But people
To
also sick and
offer,
tired
no,
of
listen, Mark, I
deputy-
get to answer my question now. You've asked it.
But people
Mark.
No, Mark, I've answered my questions. Of course they are, but you're not going to be able to avoid that if we don't do the things that actually work. We are not split on this issue. The fact of the matter is, no one has asked me to send federal troops into this city to make it safe. It has never come up. It never came up during the campaign. It's never come up in the first 2 years. The fact of the matter is, we are driving violence down on this city, and we're using every single resource that's available to us. Jails and incarceration and law enforcement is a sickness that has not led to safe communities. I'm going to work hard every single day to protect the people who are caught up in violence in this city. Guess why? You want to know why? Because the vast majority of them look like me. This president has never asked a very simple question to me, Brandon Scott, Barbara Lee, Randall Woodfin. He doesn't talk to black mayors about what it's like to live in communities that have been disinvested in. So no, we're not going to succumb to the sickness and the evil that Dr. King warned us about a generation ago. It didn't work in 74 when 970 people were being killed. It didn't work in the 90s when no one said a mumbling word about how many people were losing their lives because of violence in this city. And now we're actually doing the work that's working. Now all of a sudden everybody has these ideas. They've shown this is a group project, but we're not going to allow the President of the United States of America or any of his ilk look at the work that we're doing across this country, and then now we're experiencing some level of reprieve, and now he wants to put his name on our paper. No, not going to tolerate it. It's a sickness, and we're going to eradicate it.
Something a little different. So our cauldron of sources are saying that Walter Burnett's potential appointment as CEO of the Chicago Housing Authority is being held up again because the HUD has made an offer that you can't refuse, which is that if you all go ahead and appoint him without sorting out these potential conflicts of interest, that CHA will go into receivership, meaning that you will lose local control of the CHA and it will go to federal control. What do you have to say to respond?
First of all, it's inaccurate information. Second of all, Walter Burnett, the former alderman, is in a rarefied space. He would be one of the few individuals running a housing authority that actually grew up in public housing. The local board has not recognized some of the feedback that has come back as a conflict of interest. We're working through all of those elements and dynamics, and we fully expect that the board will be able to move forward with the former alderman. Thank you for those questions.
Monica. It's okay. Monica, go ahead. Mark, we can't. All right, we'll get to that next week. Go ahead, Monica. Thanks.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
President Trump said that an important person in the Chicago business community has asked him to come into the city to save the city. Do you have any conjecture of who this important business person is? And do you feel that the business community in general wants the National Guard here?
No, to both of them.
Okay, so yeah.
No to both of them.
Got it. Okay, next question. The last two times I went to the Bally's temporary casino, the patrons appeared to be primarily low-income Asian Americans who had been bussed there on the hour, and low-income African Americans, some who may have been coming on a PACE bus or not. I don't have a view into their bank account, so I don't know, but it felt like this is a regressive way to shore up our police and fire pensions. I know you didn't usher in the casino, but is there a way for the city to avoid trying to solve the pension problem on the backs of gamblers who may have the least ability to pay for it?
Yeah, we could tax the rich. We could tax the rich.
But is there anything on the casino front that you can do?
Well, which one? I mean, you asked me if there's a way in which we could shore up our pension.
Right. So is there any way to And there may be, like, you can't stop people from walking into a casino. But
No, and listen, this is no judgment. I mean, these aren't activities that I necessarily participate in. I'm fully aware of the data points that you're speaking of. This is something that I've addressed before I was in public office. The number of people that place their hopes and wishes in gambling that come from low-income communities. There's no secret there. That's why I do know that there are some efforts to make sure that people are being educated and that that the addiction that could come as a result of that type of activity is quite severe and real. And so we've, challenged our corporate partners to not just be sensitive, but to be thoughtful in how we engage with participants. But in terms of addressing our pension obligations in this state, I do believe that we should have progressive revenue and we should tax the rich.
Let's go to Jake.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
I want a better idea of what Chicago police would be called upon to do to protect protesters with this executive order. If ICE was shooting pepper balls at protesters in Chicago, what would this executive order have police do?
Well, first of all, the clear establishment of the area in which protesters should be protected. That's the first thing, that we have to establish those parameters. And again, it's not just on the police department. Right, and this is why our corporate counsel is here as well. If the federal government violates our local authority, we will use every tool that's available to us, and whether that's the courts. But again, we're going to enforce my executive order, and we'll do that with clear direction to the federal government or anybody else.
Switching gears, a colleague told me that just now the City Council's licensing committee has advanced a measure that would legalize video gaming terminals. Where do you stand on those? Do you see a need for a better split with the state? Is that what you want, to have those be approved in Chicago?
I mean, we ultimately have to make sure that we have, we can't leave millions of dollars on the table. And so whatever comes from City Council, if it doesn't maximize the full benefit of what this opportunity could bring to the revenue structure of our city, then I'm not going to be supportive of it. We have seen firsthand when the state of Illinois works to capture more dollars that would have otherwise gone into the local economy, whether it's personal property replacement tax, the LGDF, and other forms of revenue that we have to have better control over, quite frankly, to help address the critical needs that we face. But in what has been proposed and what have been put forward, I have not seen where this particular idea maximizes our ability to be able to receive as many dollars as possible.
So you're opposed to Alderman Beal's proposal?
Yes. All right.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you all.